So we'll just get this question done here. So here we're looking at the sine rule again. This time we're looking for our missing side because we have this side, we're looking for this side, we have this angle, we have this angle. So we can see here that we have an angle opposite the side, and here we have an angle opposite the side. So I'm just going to highlight them so that we can see them, because it's very, very important that your angle is always opposite a given side. So in this case, 44 and x will be paired together. And in this case, 38 and 10 will be paired together. Okay, so it's very, very important that you see the link there. It's always the opposite. Okay, so the opposites go together and the opposites go together. Okay, so A over sine A just means a side over the corresponding angle. So in this case, I'm going to put all my unknowns. I'm going to put my x's into the first fraction. So I'm going to start with the blue because the unknown is in the blue. So the x and the 44 have to go together. So they both represent a's. So the side represents x represents a, and the capital A is going to be 44. So I'm going to fill that in. So I'm going to have x here, right? And doesn't matter which one you put as a, it doesn't, no, as long as you make sure that it corresponds to the opposite side. So if you put 10 as a, then you have to make sure that the angle for a is 38. Is that right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be. I typically keep it on the left, but if you wanted to, you could put it on the right. Okay. Okay. So that's the first fraction done. The second fraction is going to be the side. So in this case, the side is 10. So 10 has to go on top. So I put 10 in there. All over sine of b, and that's sine of the corresponding angle. So the one that corresponds to 10 is going to be 38. So I can say sine of 38. Okay. And now what I need to do is I've got a fraction equals a fraction. So to get rid of a fraction equals a fraction, we cross multiply, right? So we cross multiply. And what I like to do when I'm cross multiplying is I like to keep all of the unknowns on the left. So if I've got an x there, I'll work out that side on the left first. Okay. So that's going to give me x times sine of 38. Okay. That's going to be equal to the, I'll do it in white, we'll do from 44, sine 44 times 10, so the opposite diagonal. So 10 times sine 44. Okay. So just to reiterate there, we had a fraction equals a fraction. So if we have a fraction equals a fraction, we need to multiply the numerator by the diagonal of the, we need to multiply the numerator by the denominator of the opposite fraction and multiply the numerator by the denominator of the diagonal fraction, right? So we're just multiplying diagonals. So this times this will give us this, and this times this will give us this. And the little trick that I said there is I tend to keep the unknowns on the left-hand side. So if you had said the white part on the left and the pink part on the right, you'll still get the same answer, but I just find it easier to keep your unknowns on the left. Okay. So if we look at that, we need to isolate the x. So we're looking to get a value for x. So if we're looking for a value for x, then we need to make sure that the x is isolated. So here you can see what's happening. X has been multiplied by sine 38. So x has been multiplied by sine 38. So I'll just highlight that. So what's actually happening here is x has been multiplied by sine 38. So to get rid of that sine 38, I need to divide the left-hand side by sine 38. So if I divide the left-hand side by sine 38, I'll be left with just x. So if I divide this by sine 38, I'll be left with just x. I have to make sure that I do the same to the opposite side. So the sine 44, I divided this side by sine 38, so I have to divide this side by sine 38. So I'm going to divide that side by sine 38. Okay, and that gives me my everything here represents numbers. It's because sine 44 represents a number, sine 38 represents a number, 10 obviously is a number. So I can type all that into the calculator and it'll give me my answer. So I'm just going to type that in and just put the calculator up so you can see. So video. Okay. And again, I'll have to move that side so you can see what we're doing. Okay. So in this case, okay, again, we need to turn on the calculator. This calculator's on. And we need to type this into the calculator. So we know it's a fraction, so we'll start by pressing the fraction button first. Then we need to put in 10 sine 44 as the numerator. So put in 10 sine 44, close your bracket. Go down then and we fill in the numerator or the denominator, which is sine 38. And close your brackets. Okay. So double check that it's correct before you do anything else. So sine 10 sine 44, 10 sine 44 is equal to sine 38. Sine 38. Yeah. So if 44 is the bottom, that means we made a mistake along the way. I'd have to check that separately, right? So if you press or equals to, and it gives us our answer. So you should have got an answer there of 11.283. So I'll just put that in there. So the answer there is 11.283. So x is equal to 11.283, 1227. And if they wanted it to the nearest two decimal places, we'll say, right? So if you wanted to give your answer to two decimal places. Okay, you'd go back to, you draw a line, you look at the number that follows. If this number here is 5 or greater, then the 8 will round up to 9. If this number is less than 5, then the 8 would just round off and your answer would be 11.28, which in this case it is. So the answer in this case is 11.28. If the units were there, if that was centimeters, I put in centimeters. If it was meters, I put in meters, but that's the final answer. And after you do a question like that, you should always look back and make sure it makes sense. You can see here, this is roughly 11, you could say. This side here was roughly 10, so that seems to fit. If you got an answer of 3032, then you'd know that it didn't seem to fit. Okay, so just make sure that you have a quick look back at your question just to see if it fits. So that's that question. I'll just and paste. Okay. We're just going to look here and see. So with trigonometry, we know this is trigonometry because we're dealing with triangles. And we're looking for this side here. So what we need to do is we need to go through the chain of how we do things. So the first thing we do is we look at it, we see angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. That won't help us in this question. And the reason why it won't help us in this question is because we have too many unknown angles. Okay. Angles, a 90-degree triangle. If I had a 90-degree triangle, I'd be able to use Pythagoras' theorem or else trig ratios. But because there's no 90-degree, I can't use Pythagoras' theorem and I can't use trig ratios. The next thing we're going to look at is the area of a triangle. So that's the last, that was the next thing that we studied. And the area of a triangle doesn't help us in this case because we don't know what the area is. If we had the area, it might help us, but in this case, we don't have the area, so it doesn't actually help us. So we're going to look at the sine rule. So we have to look at that and say, can we use the sine rule? And in order to be able to use the sine rule, you need to have two sides and two angles. So in this case, we have two sides and we have two angles. So that works for us. So we know we can use the sine rule. Okay. The important thing about the sine rule is when we're using the sine rule, you have to make sure that you've got opposite sides and opposite angles. So two of them are opposite, so they'll work. And opposite sides and opposite angles. So two of them are opposite, so they'll work. So it's very, very important that they're opposite. So in this case, we can see that this is opposite this, so they'll go together. And we can see that this here is opposite this, so they'll go together. And I can't emphasize any more than I already have. You have to make sure that they're opposite. So we can't use two of these together, and we can't use two of these together. We have to make sure that we use the one that's opposite the angle. Okay. So that brings us to our sine rule. So with the sine rule says that A over sine A is equal to B over sine B. Okay. Now, we need to be able to fill that in based on the information that we have. So we're going to fill in the first fraction, which is A over sine A. And like I said to you the last time, and like I've said in the previous videos, in order to fill that in, A represents the side and capital A represents the angle. So they need to be either the red ones or the green ones. And like I always do, I always try and keep my unknowns in the first fraction. So which one here has an unknown? And it's the red one. The red one is the unknown. So I'm going to fill this in. And what I'm going to say is A, which represents the side. So the side here is going to be 12. All over sine of the angle. And sine of the angle in this case is going to be sine of A. So you can see there, the side that I'm using is 12. And the angle is A. The next step is to fill in my second fraction. So I'm going to fill in the second fraction. So I've done the red one. So now I'm going to use the green ones. So I need to say the side, which in this case is 25, opposite sine of B, which is sine of the angle, which is sine of 140. So I'll fill that in. That's the green one. So it's going to be 25 over sine of 140. Okay. Now I look at what I have. So now I'm one step further into the question. So if you got that much correct on your Leaving Cert, that'd be your first set of marks. So say, for instance, this question was worth 10 marks. There could be 3 marks going just for getting that far, which is just filling in. So it's important that you put in every single step, that you're not just throwing down answers. Okay, so when you have a fraction equals a fraction, you can cross multiply. So when we cross multiply, what we mean is that the equal sign stays in where it is, it stays in the middle. And we're going to multiply the diagonals. So we're going to multiply sine A by 25. So sine A by 25, you can see that there in blue. And we're going to multiply 12 by sine 40. Okay. But like I said to you earlier, I always like to keep my unknowns on the left-hand side. So I'm going to put my sine A on the left-hand side. So I'm going to do this calculation here, and I'm going to put it on the left-hand side. So if I multiply sine A by 25, I'll end up with 25 sine A. Okay, so you can see I just did my calculations there. 25 times sine A is 25 sine A. Typically we put the number in front of the sine, because if we said sine A 25, we might end up getting that confused with the angle. So typically we put the number in front of the sine. Okay. The pink ones are next. So if we do the pink ones, you can see there I'm multiplying 12 by sine 140. So that will give me 12 sine 140. Okay. So that's our next step. So we're now 2 steps into the question. So there'll be more marks allocated for getting this far. So if this was worth 3 marks, as I said, you might get 5 marks for getting this far. So it's very important that you go step by step. Okay. The next step is to look at what we have and to see how we can fix it, right? So we're looking for A. So I can see I've got sine of A there. I don't want sine of A, I just want A. So to make this easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that sine A by itself. Okay. And how I do that is I look at what I'm doing to sine A here. Here what I'm doing is I'm multiplying sine A by 25. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm multiplying sine A by 25. If I want sine A by itself, I need to divide this side by 25, and then I'll just be left with sine A. But if I divide the left-hand side by 25, I have to divide the right-hand side by 25 to keep it equivalent. So that's what I'm going to do. 12 sine 140, and I'm going to have to divide that by 25. Okay. So that brings us to the next part. So what we're going to do now is we're going to type this into the calculator. And to type this into the calculator, what you need to do is you need to type. What we need to do first, before we type it into the calculator, is we need to get the A by itself. Okay. So in this case here, you can see what we're looking at is sine of A. I don't want sine of A, I just want A. So in order to get A by itself, I need to do the inverse operation. So to get A by itself, I need to get the sine inverse of all of this. Okay, just going to put that back into brackets so we can see that's back in brackets there. Okay, so we're going to have to type this into our calculator, and to type that into the calculator, we'll just do the following, right? So turn on your calculator. Okay, just change that. Okay, we'll just bring that over here so you can see it, and we'll make it bigger. Okay, so if you just turn on your calculator there, okay, and you can see your calculator there, you need to type this in, so you need to put in sine inverse. Okay, so sine inverse in this case is going to be sine inverse. So you press on, clear it, press shift, press sine, and you can see there you've got sine inverse. Okay, we now need to put in the fraction. So you can see here that we're dealing with a fraction. So I'm going to put in this fraction here. So press the fraction button. We're going to put in 12 sine 140. So 12 sine 140. We're going to close those brackets and we're going to go down. And for the denominator, we're going to put in 25. Press out, close your brackets, and press equals. So you can see there that A is going to be equal to that number there, which is 17.971148. Okay. So I'm going to take that answer and I'm going to round it to one decimal place. So if you look at that answer there, or to round it to the nearest degree, draw a line. So you can see there that 9 will cause the 17 to round up. So my final answer will be 18. So the answer in this case will be 18.